Steve Bannon, great to have you, sir.
And our wingman, as you remember, John, I listened to the show earlier about the war of impeachment. Our wingman, Jason Miller, is now the chief strategist of the campaign, reporting directly to President Trump. So the show's had a little bit of impact. I want to thank you guys for John Fredericks at the radio network for helping us start it back in October.
Let's hope that he's giving some good advice, better than the advice we had for the debacle on the Saturday rally in Tulsa. We're not very happy with the way that went down and the fact that nobody took responsibility for a litany of bad choices made. And I think until you can own up to the problems the campaign is having, I don't think you're going to fix them.
Look. But here's look. I tried to say this on Jesse Waters on Fox right before the president came on the stage the other night. I talked to Jesse. I said, look, if this thing starts on time, it'll be my involvement will be very truncated. I want to get right to the point. And the point is what's happening today. The president's going out as president to Arizona, to see the wall. On Thursday, he's going to Wisconsin to see the shipyard where 10, I think, Navy vessels are being produced over the next couple of years. Look, the campaign's one thing, but it's not going to be one Betty campaign. There's no set of rallies. There's no, campaign speech. There's no messaging with their ultimate messaging. It's how you govern every day. He's the incumbent. He's the protagonist in this drama. He's the driver of action. You have to drive action. Now, right before I just came on here, John, if you look, the president just tweeted out that he took, I think, the advice of Senator Tom Cotton, that sent a long letter to him yesterday about the Monuments Act and about requirements for these monuments, about protection under federal law, and that he's going to, this was triggered by this debacle last night in Lafayette Park, where the Antifa radicals almost tore down the statue of General Jackson, and had a riot, a mini riot with the park police, who finally came out in riot gear. But this is my point. Today going to the wall, doing the Monuments Act, going out to Wisconsin to the shipyard about jobs. People want to see, and this is what I said, Trump is the center of order. Biden is the pusher of chaos. And everybody, all the Twitter Democrats went crazy. How could Bannon say Trump's order and Biden's chaos? Well, Biden and the Democrats support the chaos, and Trump has got to show that he is the stability factor and the provider of order, and that's through action. So I think one thing that the Trump base and people are getting too hung up on is the rallies, the campaign, the messaging. Look, that's all important, and obviously got to come together. But this is about governing. You're going to win re-election if people feel comfortable that you're taking action and you're actually govening. This is about
but you got to get the message. You got to get what you just said, so Steve. You got to get that message out. That message didn't get out Saturday.
No. I know. Well, let's set that aside for a second.
Okay.
You don't need a campaign to get the message out today in the Oval Office. You sit there and you sign this enforcement of the Federal Monuments Act. You don't need a campaign to be at the wall and say, "Hey, this is American steel built to protect us." You don't need a campaign to do what he did yesterday by signing this very, at least tougher restrictions on immigration here during this financial crisis when people need jobs. Mm-hmm. These are actions a president of the United States. He is the president of the United States. He's not a candidate for president. Mm-hmm. He's the president of the United States. Mm-hmm. You act like president of the United States. You take action like president of the United States. You govern like president of the United States. You're going to be reelected. Mm-hmm. It's not about a campaign. It's not about messaging. This is not going to be one. This fantasy about who's got a better 30-second spot, who's doing 30-second spots, who's raising money to thing. Yes, that's all important, and you have to do that. A campaign needs a slogan, needs a messaging, needs the right ball cap. No, that's not going to make a difference on November 3rd. It's just not. What's going to make a difference is the actions you've taken and the results of those actions.
Well, then we got to have the actions. Would you agree
that's what I try to say. It's very simple. It's action, action, action. You have jobs. You have law and order with necessary reform. You have China. You still have this pandemic. You have this overall financial and economic crisis. Look, we have enough. This is probably the most turbulent time in, I think, modern American history, maybe all of American history. Everything that's converging on towards this, plus this radicalism of Antifa, which is a cultural Marxist organization that now is trying to go to the actual underpinnings of society, and they're very open about that. So that's gasoline on this fire of this pandemic and the financial crisis, the economic crisis, the geopolitical confrontation with China. That's all part of it. But that's called being president of the United States. If in Donald Trump, this is his moment. He's a man of action. You take action, That's your campaign. Plus, you have to have a campaign, but I think people are too much on, this rally or that rally speech and this ad and all that stuff, right? And don't get me wrong, it is important, but it pales in comparison. Every day for Donald J. Trump is November 3rd. He's going to be weighed and measured by the American people about how he's doing, and particularly how the next 4 years are going to be turbulent. This turbulence is not going away. The economic crisis we have from the pandemic is going to last for a long time. We know that. Even with a comeback, it's still going. We're going to have big structural problems we're going to have to deal with, or big structural issues we're going to have to deal with. Okay, this pandemic is not going away, right? We know that it's actually increasing as you do testing. You see that more people. I shouldn't say it's increasing. You do testing, you see more people have it,
right.
And like you said before, you have to moderate how you handle that, right? We've already tried phase one. Hey, it didn't work out for New Jersey nursing homes. It didn't work out for the nursing homes in Richmond. Right, but we're savvier, we're smarter about that. But you got the pandemic. You have the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve,
right,
is exploded, and that's going to have impacts for generations. All of this can be handled, but that's my point: is that a man of action, which the president is, in the Oval Office or in the White House, which is a center of action in our government.
Well, especially now.
Especially now. Look what's happened in the last couple of days. He signed that very tough immigration restrictions because it's about American jobs. Right? Even the au pairs, remember, they had all these exemptions that they wanted, and I think Trump at the end took them all out. He said there's so many young people out of work in so many, especially areas we need Americans back to work. So that's number one. He's at the wall today to talk about really the construction of the wall. I think it's the 200th mile of new wall. But even the replacement wall is in those areas that it needed to be replaced because they're high traffic areas. He gets to actually go to the wall today and talk about that. That's still a very important thing, although the media doesn't play it up. And one of the reasons he's being effective. Then on Wednesday, he's back to think of Buy American, of using the Defense Production Act and other things to bring jobs back to the United States and have this shipyard, which now it's going to have thousands of people employed for a number of years because we're building these ships in this Wisconsin yard. And that should be, it shouldn't be a rally. We don't need rallies. What we need is the President of the United States 5 days a week out there doing those types of things and showing people that he is, as president, is the driver of action.
Have you told him that?
We tell him every day, don't we? He watches. He watches the rebroadcast.
That's why we started your show, because he watches he's listening to your advice on air at 11 o'clock on Newsmax or on the radio now. He's tuned in shaving. So I mean, that's where your advice goes. So obviously you're telling him this. But remember, Steve, I think you're spot on.
President Trump believes that, he actually, it has more impact if it's on television. That's why we have to thank Chris Ruddy for putting up the Newsmax. No, listen, that's why Jason was so effective on the show. That's why Jason's going to be very effective as strategist. Look, President Trump knows this. He's a man of action. I think you're going to see a lot more action, a lot more centered action, and things are going to be driving. He's the protagonist. In this drama, it's Donald Trump that's the protagonist. Look, the Democrats have obviously put up, and I think Tucker said it very well last night on the show, kind of a husk. Joe Biden is just a stand-in, right, for this kind of radicalized agenda. And we understand that Elizabeth Warren will be Secretary of the Treasury, and Kamala Harris, if she's not VP, will be Attorney General. You've seen the agenda they want to do. They're very upfront about that, although they don't want to, be too precise because it's too radicalized. So that's what it's up against. There'll be an up or down vote on that, but you have to be the driver of action. And he can be, because he is the man of action. And I think, as you see, and I'm glad he took the advice of Tom Cotton in this letter and start to step into this monuments issue. Look, when they're tearing down General Grant, right? When they're tearing down Father, the priest out in the West Coast that set up the missions, Junipero Serra. When you're tearing down Lincoln, when they're removing Teddy Roosevelt, when in England they're desecrating Gandhi and Churchill, who's the greatest anti-fascist leader we've ever had, right? It just shows you their hypocrisy. When they're going after President Lincoln. Right across from Parliament and desecrating his monument, when they want to take Lincoln off of remove Lincoln, right, because he was a racist, right? You realize that their agenda is, and I'm all for, look, in the monuments thing, if you want to have referendums, if you want to have votes, you want to have petitions, you want to debate it, you want to have people elected and do it, hey, that's American democracy. That should go on. The debate over the monuments is a debate I think should happen, and I think people ought to get their voices out there. And if they want to take monuments down, they ought to petition and do things and do it at the city council level or at the federal level, wherever the monument is. But to just allow a mob of anarchists to come in and start tearing things down, it shows you don't have civic society.
Well, and the police are standing down. I mean, they're told in these cities, Steve, to stand down. So this is the chaos you talked about when you first said, the president is the center of order and Biden is the purveyor of chaos, because you get these mobs and, look what's happening. Both of us spent a lot of time in Richmond. That's where you grew up. You look at what's going on there now every night. I mean, you can't walk outside.
Well, listen, I think this civic society has got to be reinforced. It shouldn't be lost on anybody that this morning they're going to start taking down the occupied zone in Seattle. Why? They had a murder over the weekend. I think a 19-year-old young man got gunned down, and I believe it was tough to get medical care to him because of the mob that was there. They couldn't get.
So who was going to dismantle it today?
Well, we'll have to see. I said it on the show a week ago. The former commissioner of D.C. and Philadelphia, who was the commissioner of police or the head of the police, a senior black police officer, he was on MSNBC and not telling them what they wanted to hear. They kind of cut him off a little bit 2 weeks ago because he said, look, I think it's a very dangerous situation in Seattle. I don't think they should allow this to happen. I don't think the police should have given up that precinct. And he says, I think the mayor made a lot of mistakes and didn't have the back of the police. And he said at the time, he said, look, that's a 6 square block area. That's about 2 miles. He said, every day it goes on, it's going to be much tougher for the police to come in and restore order. So we'll have to see. Mm-hmm. They've got some bad, as President Trump would say, they got some bad hombres out in Seattle. And so we're going to have to see. But the liberal mayor of Seattle was finally driven to the point of between businesses and the tax base, bottom blowing out of that. And this violence was finally because the citizens started to demand it, the not right-wing citizens of Seattle demanding that their city be taken, be occupied by citizens, not a bunch of outsiders and people coming in and the zone. This is what the thing was last night. Mm-hmm. The riot last night was trying to establish one of these occupy zones right at Lafayette Park. They desecrated St. John's Church again. Right, they desecrated that with spray painting, etc. And they're trying to set up an Occupy zone here in D.C. They're trying to set them up throughout, the rest of the country. So it's. But listen, the president is taking action today. You're seeing that, and I think this campaign will come down to his actions he takes as president. You obviously need a campaign, but I think the campaign pales in comparison to his being weighed and measured by the American people in a time of obviously a crisis of many different, complex, underlying events of how he handles that complexity and how he does this going forward. And I think if Donald Trump reverts back to being Donald J. Trump, things will work out fine.
Action, action, action. Look, I agree with you. Forget the rallies. Every day he should be doing something that is going to positively impact lives of people going forward, because certainly the Democrats are not doing anything. There's a lot of symbolism. Nobody's changing anything. No question about that. But, Steve, would you agree with me that right now, I guess this is where, much to my chagrin, is I'm getting a lot of happy talk. I learned this from you, Steve. I'm a great student. I learned this from you during impeachment. You said, beware, young fella. That was a compliment. Beware of happy talk, okay? Beware of the talking points. Think critically. Remember that? During impeachment, all the happy talk? I'm getting the same thing now, all this happy talk. Do you agree with me that right now, right now we're losing? Right now we're losing.
Here's what I agree with. I agree with the reason that the John Fredericks Radio Network punches way above its weight, not just throughout the country, throughout the world. You have to realize in Central Virginia and other places where the John Fredericks Radio Network is, because you reach the deplorables, and because it's the working class people and middle class people in our country that so much depends upon. This is why I'm public enemy number one in Beijing, because they understand what the American people think and what the American people decide to act on is still the most powerful force in our world. And I think the reason that you have become under attack is the fact people realize that you can think these things through and assist the deplorables in a broad context to start thinking about things in a different way. And that's why you can just never accept the spin. Just think things through, like we did on impeachment. I think the impeachment, and us starting the show, was one of the inflection points that got that much more organized. And I think the same way here. Don't believe the spin, because here's the reason: you and your listeners are dedicated for the country to grow and to prosper, right? And
Yes.
obviously, it's the backbone of the Trump movement, and President Trump is obviously central to that. But you want to make sure you're not telling him what he wants to hear, but you're telling him what he has to hear. And I think that's the most important thing. And you're terrific at being to cut through it now. Now that you've had a little training,
Yes.
you're now the scales have fallen off your eyes. You've had a little thing. But this is why I go back to: look, he's president of the United States. He's a man of action. And I say, if you look back over his track record, and this is why, remember, I've got a very different take on this Bolton book. Right? If you listen to the show every day, I've gone through the Bolton book, and I was there for some of it, but I know all the details. I mean, I know all the issues they're talking about. Forget the fact that John Bolton's lying on certain things. Forget the fact that the book is obviously highly classified, and I do believe John Bolton will go to prison because of the book. If you really look at the merits of it, President Trump's essentially right on everything.
Right.
John Bolton's just wrong, and and this is central to the Trump revolution. He should wear
it like a badge of honor instead of
absolutely.
running around talking about, he lied and he said this. He should wear it like a badge of honor. Like, of course they're going to write this book on me, because I am against the globalist, interventionist things that have taken this country down on its knees. I've been railing against it for 30 years. I campaigned against it. I'm driving the globalist intervention neocon whoremongers nuts. And so this book is my badge of honor.
If you read all 592 pages, you come to the conclusion that guy Trump is fighting everybody, but he's right. And no, it's just like he's the hero of the book. That's what I think. The guys at the White House. Yes, it's got some sections that are very snarky, but that's just a guy being snarky. It's actually a very powerful reinforcement of President Trump's America First. He's kept us out of all these shooting wars when he's being pressed by these guys to go in guns blazing when he doesn't have to. You understand, he understands economic warfare, and he understands information warfare. Donald Trump actually, in the book, turns out to be much more sophisticated about the 21st century. It's the way the Chinese are. And people shouldn't think this TikTok thing on which I don't think was the main reason for the thing. I'd like your analysis. It might scare people off of too many, but that was information warfare. Yes, you have young kids doing it, stuff like that, but that is also the CCP. Remember, TikTok is part of the apparatus of the Chinese intelligence apparatus and military apparatus, just like Zoom is, just like Huawei is. All that technology is stolen by the Chinese intelligence services, and it's military, and then repurposed in China. So the CCP's information warfare is backing up all that. Donald Trump understands this. He understands it much more sophisticated than John Bolton. John Bolton kind of comes off as, I think, a rube. He thinks in the book he comes off as so smart. If you read it, you go, Bolton is not just a scary individual. He's actually not particularly bright. Mm-hmm. He's one of these guys from Yale that thinks they're so smart, and you just think he doesn't really have common sense. Donald Trump has street smarts and common sense and a powerful intellect. You combine those in a man of action, you're going to have good results. When he takes bold action, like shutting down travel from China, declaring a national emergency on the coronavirus, when Donald J. Trump takes powerful action, good things happen. And that, to me, should be the lesson. If you read the book, it's the same thing. When Trump is the driver of the smart action, being advised by guys like Bolton that always want him to military conflicts. And I think it's, once again, it's an example of, don't believe the spin. Just look at the facts. But I agree with you right now. But I would say I think people put too much emphasis on what a campaign should do when you're an incumbent. He's going to be weighed and measured about how he's doing, not some messaging or not some 30-second spot, or not some new slogan or new hat. Okay, he's going to be judged by what he does every day. And if the American people say, "Hey, in a time of a crisis, which was perpetrated by the Chinese Communist Party, whether they created it in a lab or not, CNN misses the point. We understand in the chain of title of when they knew about it, they allowed this to be exacerbated throughout the world and have massive destruction for their own interest." Okay? In a time of turbulence, Trump is a man of action that can get us through this.
We got 4 months. How do we win?
I think you win today is November 3rd. Tomorrow is November 3rd. Thursday's November 3rd. Here's how you win. You win the day by action, not by messaging. You win the day by action. This is not, you can't message your way out of this. You can't, there's nothing the Democrats can involved in messaging. It's about action. You take action that makes the country, that handles the pandemic, that makes the country more prosperous, understanding we're in a deep financial problem, not caused by him. He's done very smart actions so far, but quite frankly, some of these actions, like the explosion of the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, what we've done, these economic bridges, this another big stimulus package coming up, they all have to be handled judiciously. If he does that every day, Friday's November 3rd, Saturday's November 3rd, every day is election day, because you have to show the American people, I'm on top of this, and I'm taking action to restore order. I'm taking action to restore prosperity. You know, I had a striver's economy. African Americans and Hispanics were participating in this economy like they've never done before. I built that, or I was the leader that helped the country build that, is the way to say it, and we're going to do it again. And we're going to roll our sleeves up, and we're going to do it. And Donald J. Trump, is the best bet, besides this guy from Wilmington, Delaware, that represents global corporations all his life, which he's done. And is a guy that's had a disastrous foreign policy. That's Joe Biden, or the radical nature of the Democratic Party. If you do that every day, you're going to win, and you're going to win big, quite frankly. That's what the Democrats want you to get into a messaging war. They want you to get into kind of all these phony non-issues. Just do the job. If you do the job, you're going to be reelected, and you're going to be reelected in a big way.
Stephen K. Bannon, thanks for being with us. Stephen K. Bannon, you can hear him 10 to noon, Monday to Saturday, John Fredericks Radio Network. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, brother.